Okay. Very warm good afternoon, everyone. Winter's gone. Clearly, I'm overdressed. I thought I'll be meeting a lawyer, and here I am. Uh, so, for those who know, uh, for those of you who don't know Sai Deepak, you are at a major loss. Okay. I don't know how should I introduce you. An eminent lawyer, a leading light, a leading public intellectual, someone who's doing things very differently, uh, a scholar. Uh, I don't know you do. I know that you don't like me, calling you a historian, but somebody who's trying to, uh, you know, merge history with constitution, with public life, and law, obviously. Now, Sai Deepak has a very interesting background. He started off as an engineer, or rather, he uh, trained as an engineer initially, and then ventured into law. And that also, you wanted to become an aeronautical engineer, it seems. Uh, and now he's a leading lawyer in Supreme Court, a litigator. The you know before and I'm also a lawyer, so when I meet you, there is slight envy as well, because I always used to think that lawyers are very unidimensional. uh, I call them intellectual perverts, but here I am, meeting someone who's pushed the envelope, written two super books, almost bestsellers in Amazon in the non-fiction category. uh, and without much ado, I will just uh, closer. Okay. Uh, is it better? Okay. Uh, I hope you missed the intellectual pervert part, right? Okay. Okay. All right. So you know, without much ado, I would just request you, Sai Deepak, to take us through your journey as to what is it that led you to choose law firstly, from engineering, and why did you move towards picking up an area which is something which is not a part of what mainstream intellectuals do in India, right? So what was that trigger point? And you know,
So, first of all, thanks for giving me a space to interact with the students of this city. How many law students do we have here? Okay. So you said that most lawyers are intellectual perverts, and you said I'm an exception. Some might disagree. So, um, as an engineer, one of the things that I was clear about was that I wasn't going to limit the scope of my vision exclusively to engineering. So obviously there was a debating side, there was a side that was interested in current affairs, so on and so forth, which I was fairly active even in my schooling days. It just so happens that I thought that the engineering program would be slightly more comprehensive and slightly more colorful, not colorful in a different sense, uh, and would indulge these appetites. It just so happens that I didn't find it that way. Plus, I was fairly vocal about my, let's call it, ideological positions, if not political positions. And I was keen on pursuing a master's in aerospace engineering. The preparation for GRE was on. I was even being considered for a sponsored master's in aeronautical engineering at IIT Kanpur. It just so happens that by 2004, which I think it was a fairly polarizing year, politically speaking, in Tamil Nadu, it so happens that college campuses have a way of showing you your place, particularly if there are political outcomes, whether it's at the state level or the national level. So it has very real consequences for your friendships. It has very real consequences for your ability to speak your mind on campuses. When this happened, I basically felt that while I took to engineering out of a lot of interest and passion, I certainly did not want to continue as an engineer because I thought there was no point in being a mute, silent spectator on the sidelines to this massive societal churn that was going on, and I wanted to make sense of it. The idea was to equip myself with some kind of a degree that gives me a clear picture of the architecture of the system and understand why is it that these positions are so politically incorrect? Is it because the position is fundamentally indefensible, or is the position not being articulated and represented properly? And I felt, given an opportunity, I think I can defend my positions fairly well. So the choice for an engineer is typically between either an MBA or a GRE for a master's or civil services. I've never understood the value of an MBA program. Pardon me for saying so. I don't know much about it, but I've never understood the value of it. I could, perhaps there's something deficient in me because I'm not able to relate to the program even today. Um, so between civil services and a master's in aerospace engineering, civil services seemed like the best possible option. And you must understand that for someone who comes from a southern family, and especially if it happens to be a low middle class family, law doesn't figure in your list of career priorities anywhere whatsoever. And even by 2006, the profession hadn't acquired the kind of respectability that it has today. So it never featured in my list of options. The thing about civil services is I was fairly confident of perhaps clearing the examination, but I wasn't sure of surviving in the system with my kind of candor and outspokenness. So that I wasn't sure of. So I'd gone to IIT Kharagpur for a paper presentation in engineering as part of the industrial engineering department. And that was when we were being told by the then director of IIT Kharagpur, Shri Shishir Dubey, who was a good friend of Shri Murli Manohar Joshi, that from 2006, a program in law with a specialization in intellectual property rights was about to make a debut, which was specifically meant for the scientific pool of the country. I went through the schema, let's say the schema of the particular program, and I thought I could sell this program to my parents, because had it been a plain and simple law degree in any other place, I would have been shown the door. Because it happens to be law in IIT with specialization in intellectual property rights, I had all the incentives to offer to my parents to help me make the transition. Of course, it still took a lot of roundtable conferences at home before I could get them to agree and see the value in this particular transition. And I've said this before, just as Indian foreign policy is sometimes influenced by American foreign policy, Indian families listen to NRI families better. So relatives sitting in the United States said, no, 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 in the US, the combination of engineering and JD is fantastic and it attracts the best of minds. This seems to be the way of the future. And since it happens to be from the IIT, you must allow him to pursue his aspirations in this. So that helped me make the transition. But the moment I entered law school, this much was very clear, that I had found my calling. I fell in love with the subject. I fell in love with subjects such as jurisprudence, common law, property, and a host of subjects. In fact, the problem with the 3-year program is it doesn't have enough of economics and political science, which is what I think gives students of the integrated 5-year program an advantage. So I actually miss having not been exposed to the 5-year program, and I think I'd have done much better by way of having a rounded skill set as a lawyer had I been exposed to the 5-year program. But nevertheless, I think I've done whatever I could. And once that happened, once the transition was made, although intellectual property was and remains something that I'm fairly good at, I was clear that I was never going to limit myself to a particular specialization. Because engineering से वकालत की जो छलांग मारनी है वो तो कर ही लिया है, उसके बाद क्या डरना? That's the end of the matter. After that, there's no point in limiting yourself to a narrow area. So for the first, I think 6 or 7 years, I spent a good deal of time establishing myself as a competent IP litigator, and also allied areas of practice such as competition law and so on and so forth. But once I went independent, by which time I'd already gained a reputation as someone who could argue without being led by anybody else, I started taking up briefs from across the board, especially on the constitutional side. Because you see, when I left my previous law firm, I was an associate partner. And when you happen to be an associate partner of a firm, if you happen to take positions which could be slightly controversial, it affects the standing of the firm, it affects the reputation of the firm, and I didn't want anybody else to pay the price or take the responsibility for my positions. I said, I will take the responsibility for my position. So when I went independent, I felt liberated in the sense of being able to pursue those causes. To be fair, my former law firm, Sai Krishna & Associates, was also comfortable in indulging my passion. It just so happens that I did not think it was the right thing to do, because it's when you run a firm, and especially if you happen to be a managing partner, you have many more responsibilities and a lot of mouths to feed. So I didn't want to be the guy who caused any kind of trouble thanks to the positions he takes or the beliefs he puts stock in. So when I went independent, I was able to pursue all of that. So I've been independent for the last 6.5 years now. June 2016 is when I went independent. During this period, I've had a fairly interesting journey where I would say intellectual property continues to be about 50 to 60% of my practice. Most of the matters in which I get engaged are intellectual property, but outside of that, it's now Companies Act, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, Competition Act, marital rape petitions, constitutional matters across the board, legalization of ganja, so on and so forth. So I've had a host of options. So it's been very interesting. So from representing a celibate deity to representing uh, the right to recreative use of marijuana, it's been a fairly interesting journey. So that's where it stands.
So a lot of food for thought. Ganja. So interesting. You mentioned that 2004 was a landmark year for you. Uh, many people think that 2014 was a landmark year for India when things, took a different course. So why 2004, and what was it that that led you to uh, choose a different path for yourself?
So, am I audible? Yes. So, those who have lived through 2004 will understand the value of 2014 better.
Well
And
said.
since we were at a particular phase, so it's like this, I was keen on Mr. Vajpayee coming back to power for all sorts of reasons. Um, the India Shining campaign flopped like nobody's business. It fell on its face flat. And the coalition partners of the then NDA at the state level in Tamil Nadu, such as ADMK, lost all 39 seats and all 39 constituencies fully. And therefore, there were severe repercussions on the campus. Because at least if the state partner had done well, because you have to realize that campus politics in Tamil Nadu is extremely vicious. It's very vocal, it's vehement and vociferous, regardless of which Vichardhara you represent or stand for. And I'm not going to blame a particular side for it. And as someone who certainly took a serious interest in the larger public discourse and who had always been vocal, I had very physical and personal repercussions, which I responded to as well. So I wanted to actually understand the root of the problem better. 2014, in that particular sense, I would say certainly represents a clear shift in the political Overton window of this country. But I've said this before, I don't wish to be the mouthpiece for any political organization because I would rather represent a particular cause than an organization. And therefore, as long as the organization works for that particular cause, I stand by it. But if that's not the case, I'm no more going to be the votary of that particular organization. So my position is very clear. So I'm not an organizational loyalist or a party loyalist in that particular sense. And I don't wish to be attributed with any such motives because particularly when the country doesn't have a decent opposition, which I think is important regardless of who is in power, there must be at least a cross section of people who play the role of the keepers of the conscience. And you can't constantly clap at everything that the government does. I know I'm speaking in Gujarat, I'm very conscious of it. But nevertheless, I think it needs to be said. So 2014, I think, is a very clear shift in the window. Now, there are people who suddenly found their spine after 2014 to speak up on these issues. But people like me have been doing so for quite a long time. In fact, there were times when we had to write under pseudonyms for the fear of being hounded in careers and whatnot. But nevertheless, we came out in the open and we started speaking about these issues because 2011 to 14, I think the churn had already started thanks to what was happening at the central level. Corruption, a host of issues, uh, polarization through appeasement, and so on and so forth. These were issues which had to be verbalized and vocalized. So I think 2014 marks a very clear milestone. I have no problems with it. But I just hope that this discussion with respect to the rediscovery of the roots of this country and civilization isn't limited to scoring brownie points at the political level between two different organizations. It has to be much more meaningful. It has to be more comprehensive. And that means the society needs to take a greater role or play a greater part in this particular awakening movement, is how I would see it. I'm just happy that certain options have opened up for expression of certain opinions which were previously not permissible. A few years ago, I was offered or invited to write for a couple of mainstream publications in the country. I never asked for a space. I sent my pieces because they asked for it. But the moment they realized the tone and tenor was not exactly politically correct, I was given all sorts of administrative reasons for not publishing those pieces, which were solicited by them in the first place. Uh, they were never able to point out if there was any legal flaw. Was it provocative? Was it inflammatory? Was it obscene? Whatnot? Show me a legal basis at the very least. So it has come to a point now where the Indian Express has reached out and has offered a space saying, please write. So that column has started. So I would say that we have come a significant distance from 2004, but there is still a long way to go. And as much as there is a cause for hope, there is equally a cause for concern. And one of the causes for concern is that while the government gets quite a few things right, the government also gets quite a few things abysmally wrong. And there is a serious policy continuity in that particular sense between the previous government and the current government. And unfortunately, we don't have an articulate, sophisticated, clear-minded opposition to take up these issues. So I think it's in that particular sense, I think it's a cause for concern. I wish that either the government listens to its stakeholders in some of these issues, or at the very least, there are other political options which bring them to the notice of the public. Because after a point, it so happens that the quality of public discourse takes a hit when there is nobody to question. And that, I think, should never be the case. For a country like Bharat, with diversity of opinions and diversity of options, it should never come to a point that you're left with only one option politically. That should never be the case. And I say this as someone who bleeds saffron. I'm very clear about it. And despite that, my position is that a plurality of options is important. Let's look at it even this way. For my own ideological goals or whatever it may be, I would rather that everybody bat for my cause as opposed to me being reduced to just going after one particular political option to get the job done. So I am someone who believes in that kind of competitive politics. Let's see what the future has in store.
Interesting. Thank you. The way we decided that we will, move with the session is that we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So we will, give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. So, let us see who's, yes, sir. Can somebody pass on the mic, please?
So just a few clarifications. The conversation between him and me is not scripted. But assuming it were scripted, this is an opportunity for you to come after me as sharply as possible. So please come after me. Throw whatever you can. As long as it's civil and it's related to the topic, I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And thanks to Karnavati University for bringing you here, giving us an opportunity to interact.
I'm happy
So
to be
my
here.
question is you being from the southern part of India and now like practicing in the northern part of India, how do you see that section or the majority of the people see current growth towards development, technology and current government's efforts versus people from the northern part of India? And where all there is an opportunity that people should come align and achieve the common cause of developed nation.
So I think the good part is, thanks to the explosion of information on social media, there is a comparative competition here. So people get to see infrastructure and the availability of opportunities in certain states, and therefore, notwithstanding certain political fissures which are language based between the north and the south, I know for a fact that there's been a greater movement in terms of learning languages of the north, simply because that is the economic requirement. So political भाषणबाजी के लिए आप कुछ भी कर लें, But economic realities are economic realities. And so if somebody is forced to learn Marathi because he has to work in Mahindra and Nagpur, or if he's forced to learn Hindi for whatever reason to work in other parts of the country, then they will learn. And similarly, as much as I would want this movement to happen, there is also a greater realization in a significant cross section of the northern part of the country that Hindi need not be spoken by everyone. I am not someone who is a Hindi dveshi, and please take this position on face value. I have spoken in Hindi as often as possible. I have a very dear love for the language. Even in school, I've done well in the subject. As a language which is fairly close to Sanskrit, I have more than one reason to be fond of the language, thanks to the script and whatnot. Okay. However, I am equally conscious of the reality that Bharat is like a thali with multiple options. And every dish in this thali has its own value. And fortunately, I think bridges are being built thanks to mutual efforts from both sides. So, on the economic front, I think everybody is competing to make sure that their state is perhaps the lead destination for investment. Regardless of who's in power, I see the discussion happening. So, day before yesterday, I was at this Think Edu conclave of the New Indian Express in Chennai. And I happened to watch the session of the Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, PTR Tyagarajan, who sees me as an evil force. He has said this as much, thanks to my ideological positions. But nevertheless, I respect him for his knowledge of finance and the manner in which he conducts the state. Okay, I may have my serious disagreements with his political lineage. I may also see him as an evil force when it comes to ideological issues. But there are very clear, let's say, common grounds to be met. And I'm seeing that Uttar Pradesh has woken up. That sleeping giant of a state has woken up. A state which has been constantly been rubbished as a Bimaru state and as the cow belt, the Hindi heartland and all that. All these states have made rapid strides. For the last 10 years, I've been the special counsel for the state government of Madhya Pradesh, representing it in the Basmati litigation. And I know for a fact that on the agriculture front, Madhya Pradesh has done a fabulous job. And having delivered the goods on agriculture, it has now shifted its sights, or rather it's now set its sights on improving its industrial policy. So I would say that thanks to international pressure, opportunities that are showing up, and greater awakening, regardless of who is in power, there are serious causes for hope. But the one thing that there is, I would say, a cause for concern is the freebie culture, which unfortunately the Delhi government seems to be pushing hard. And in the process, I think it cultivates a false sense of entitlement in the public. That we are entitled to free bijli, we are entitled to free this and free that. A country which aspires to be a global power, at the very least a regional power, must have a public which has a sense of responsibility. And the state has a serious role to play in shaping public discourse. But when the state encourages this kind of freebie mentality, I think it's a very serious problem. So as long as we are fighting on economics, and with a certain degree of necessary welfare component, I don't have a problem with it. But if you wish to follow a Venezuelan model of economics, I think it's extremely irresponsible, especially for a country which is still seen as a lower middle income group country. We are not even in the middle income group country, by the way. So there are, I think, very positive signs from the societal end, but state dispensations will also need to change their attitudes. Unfortunately, voting considerations, electoral considerations undermine our economic objectives. I hope that the public is able to reject such political options in the interest of better options. Yes, next.
Thanks. Now let's spice up the afternoon. Come on, we need some interesting questions because you're not going to get a man of his stature coming here very often. Okay, youngster, yeah.
First of all, sir, Jai Shri Ram, and I hope
Jai
I'm
Shri
not
Ram.
gonna get bumped outside the gate because this is Gujarat.
Yeah.
I have two questions. Firstly, we have got a plethora of left-wing historians and left-wing political narrative setters.
Right.
And we have got a paucity of right-wing authors in India. So where do you see the problem is, and we are seeing good authors coming out now, where do you see the problem is and what is the remedy to it? That's the first question I have. And second question is, we have a very tempered and a narrativized history which is being taught to us. A history which is falling with one economic and one political ideology with the entire Nehru-Gandhi era, wherein Savarkar has been, tarnished as the villain of the Indian history. Where do you see the remedy lying, wherein we restructure the entire Indian history and restructure it according to the actual historical facts? Giving an example that Gandhi, who is the ambassador, known as the ambassador of peace, was the same person who supported Britishers with the entire Zulu rebellion. So
Correct.
where do you see the entire restructuring coming from the historical perspective?
So as someone who's taken part in multiple public debates on the question of history, this much is clear that the argument has been won on the fact that what has been passed on as history to generations of Bharatiyas is a distorted Nehruvian Marxist version of it. So in that sense, I think there is really very little response left. But I don't think it stops at that. That is merely the identification of the problem. The question is, what is the solution? On the aspect of solution, allow me to disagree with you on one aspect. There has never been, I repeat, there has never been a paucity of non-left historians producing credible work. The problem is they were never given access to channels of dissemination through the state. And allow me to again say this as a matter of constructive criticism, that remains the position even today. Which means what you see is production of content by private individuals through private publications. Now, have those publications and has that content percolated into state curriculum? The answer is a no. And for that you can't hold either the private individuals responsible, and you can't constantly blame the Gandhi, Nehru, Marxist establishment for it, because you are no more in the opposition. Having come to power, you don't get to say this when you're close to the end of the second term, oh, that our textbooks are still like this. The responsibility for that has to fall squarely at the doors of the center. So the question would be, how seriously have you taken the MHRD appointments? How seriously have you taken the policies of the MHRD? When you had the opportunity to hit reset and do a better job of it through the NEP, did you actually do a good job of the NEP? Where is the public discourse on the criticism as well as, let's say, constructive criticism of the NEP? How many such discussions have we seen? In other jurisdictions, when content and history textbooks are changed, parents participate in discussions with experts to say, this is what we want, this is what we don't want. Where are these discussions happening here? So there's a problem at two levels. How seriously do parents want their children to be exposed to the right kind of history? That is the demand aspect. How serious is the government about addressing this particular issue is the supply aspect. And there is a deficiency at both ends. It remains a storm in a teacup where this is the concern of the affluent few or the educated few or the aware few. But otherwise, it is not an electoral issue. It will never find its way into the electoral manifesto. And anything that doesn't find its way into the electoral manifesto has no value for any government. And unfortunately, it so happens that the current dispensation is an election-winning machine. Therefore, it needs to be able to look at certain issues beyond the realm of merely winning elections. If your question was, okay, if the argument was, where are the people producing the content? Well, content is now available. So it's a question of populating the right kind of people in institutions such as the ICHR, the Indian Council for Historical Research. Have you seen any changes in the NCRT? No, because one of the former MHRD ministers took pride in making the statement that we have not changed a single page in the history textbook. And he wanted us to show this as a badge of honor, when in fact it is a badge of shame and a badge of non-performance as far as this department is concerned. So as much as I would want to support the government on certain other fantastic initiatives, I would certainly say on the education front, particularly with respect to history, I don't think they have done the job. It's certainly not up to the mark.
I
Uh,
yeah. S-
Yes, sir.
since you're in making inquiry towards rediscovering our roots,
Yes, sir.
cultural roots, uh, and since you're also a lawyer, I've asked this a very basic question to a lot of friends who are lawyers. What does law mean in Hindi? And this question is for you as well as all the law department students. This is question one. Question two depends on how do you answer question one.
So, as a non-native speaker of Hindi, I would want to choose between dharma and nyaya. Nyaya is justice. However, I don't know how many people watch this movie, Mulk, by Anubhav Sinha. So at the fag end of the movie, Ashutosh Rana delivers a line, and people in theaters were clapping wildly. I thought, what idiots. Anyways, uh, he basically said at the end of the verdict, फिर से न्याय ने धर्म को चित कर दिया. That was his statement, clearly showing how narrowly dharma has been interpreted, which is it has been approximated and triangulated to religion. If you were to ask anyone who has even a decent understanding of Hindu jurisprudence, nyaya which is inconsistent with dharma is anyaya. There cannot be a concept of justice which is beyond the pale of dharma. And under the Vajpayee government, they had started a commission under the leadership of Sri K. Parasaran on revisitation of the constitution through a dharmic perspective. So what they wanted to do was Bharatiya Karan of the Bharatiya Samvidhan. As usual, it was called Bhagwa Karan. And that project had to be stopped midway. And I haven't seen a discussion on the very same issue come about ever since. So the long answer to your short question is, our notions of justice, our notions of what is right and what is wrong emanate from that Gangotri called Dharma. And Gangotri itself comes from the Jata called Rita. And unless and until we understand these fundamental concepts, we will be muddled in either Anglo-Saxon or Roman notions of justice, which continues to be the case. And anyone who understands the history of common law, which is what we constantly call Bharat as a common law jurisdiction, common law has its origins in the Testament, Old and New. It has very clear biblical foundations. In the first book, with authority, I've cited this from their own judgments. So much so that, okay, so we all know the history of the British East India Company to a significant extent. So British East India Company was given an exclusive monopoly or a license to operate in Bharat. Now those entities who indulged in trade and who were not parties or who were not part of the East India Company, British East India Company, were hauled up and sued by the British East India Company in English courts. They said, I have the exclusive license from the government. How can you indulge in trade in this territory when you don't have the license? I'm the exclusive licensee for this trade. In those judgments, I'll tell you what the discussion was. A Christian state cannot indulge in trade with a heathen jurisdiction or a pagan jurisdiction. And a Christian citizen can indulge in trade with a non-Christian state only if it is sanctioned by the crown, because the crown is the protector of the Christian faith. And therefore, those who violated the exclusive license which was given to British East India Company were held guilty on 2 counts. One for violating the exclusive license, and the second for violating principles of Christianity. Both. I've cited those judgments in the book. This is the extent to which common law and Christian, let's say English jurisprudence, is heavily rooted in Christian jurisprudence or Judeo-Abrahamic traditions. Ask most lawyers and they'll be so comfortable saying, oh, we are proud bearers of common law tradition, we are proud torchbearers of Anglo-Saxon tradition. They don't even know how unsecular these traditions are. So they will bat for secularism under the constitution and also subscription to common law, which has unsecular origins at the same time. It is as antagonistic as it can get. What's your second question?
I think you've already answered my second question.
Fair enough.
It's just that the concepts are getting lost, in translation or the wrong kind of semantics. So I think
So
you've
when the
answered it.
NEP was released, as opposed to asking how do we do a Bharatiya Karan of Indian legal education, there was only one paragraph, and if my memory serves me right, I had prepared a representation, para 16.7, where the only question that was asked was, how is artificial intelligence going to affect the justice dispensation system? In the national education policy, where you should have asked whether Hindu jurisprudence, such as the Shad Darshanas, do they find any place as part of political theories and political legal theory education in this country? That question was given a complete go by in such a crucial area. And hence, when someone says this is a very Hindu conscious government, I will always test a government's Hindu consciousness not on the basis of politics, but on the basis of policy. Until Rajniti does not affect Niti, it has really very little consequence.
Brilliant. Thank you. Maybe ask one of the students to ask questions. Yeah, please.
Sir,
Sorry,
we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
We'll come
We'll
back.
come back to you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
My
afternoon.
name is Manav. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Sir, my question is, in Chinese we say China as China, and in English also China as China. Same goes for Japan, Pakistan, American. Now, you have written a book, India that is Bharat. I can also say India that is Hindustan. India ke itne naam kyun? First. Second question is, sir, until when the batch of being a minority sector, Article 29 and 30 ke kavach mein, the government will give free hands on the protection of this religious minority community, and the government will carry on governing the religious majority temples. So these are my questions.
So one small correction. China is not China in Chinese. Japan is not Japan in Japanese. They have different names. And as someone who's done some amount of reading on this, that's the difference is China doesn't call itself China or using a name that the rest of the world has given it. Bharat constantly calls itself India, and it takes a lot of pride in it. And it feels that the use of Bharat to call Bharat, despite its presence in the constitution, somehow violates our misplaced notions of secularism. During the Constituent Assembly debates, there was a very clear discussion on why not Hindustan, why Bharat, Bharatvarsh, so on and so forth. They finally said, Jambu Dweep is a geographical notion, Bharatvarsha is a cultural notion, Bharat is a political notion. They're very clear about these distinctions. And so they said, Bharatvarsha or Aryavarta effectively represents a cultural sphere of influence. But as a political entity, you will call it Bharat. Hindustan is a later introduction thanks to the introduction of Farsi and how the Turkic Mongoloid invaders, such as the Mughals, started calling it Hindustan and so on and so forth. But Bharat was traced to the Puranas directly. So I have extracted discussions from the Constituent Assembly where they trace the use of Bharat to I think it's Vayu Purana. I'm not sure. I could be entirely wrong. You'll have to pardon me if I'm getting it wrong. And we've been constantly told that the word Bharat comes from Raja Bharat, which may not be entirely true also. So scholars will tell you Bharat effectively comes, and I'll be branded a Manuvadi now. The other name for Manu is Bharat. And therefore a land of Manu or the land of Manu is called Bharat. Bharat is not a word, it's actually an acronym. And I happened to come across this where one scholar, rather in fact shared with me authoritative sources to exactly explain where the word Bharat comes from. Any case, coming back to the point, Hindustan is not something that I would want to subscribe to, because I'm asking myself, where does this word come from? It comes from an imposed position from somebody else. What do my sources say are my name, and therefore Bharat is what I would be comfortable with. Coming to your question of secularism and all these things, it's useless to ask this question. Right to Education Act, when it was introduced by the Congress government, the opposition specifically said, why should minority educational institutions be exempt from the application of the Right to Education Act? And therefore, if you read the opposition debates at that point, they opposed it tooth and nail, saying this violates the principle of equality. If a societal obligation is cast, saying children until the age group of 14 must have the right to education, and you say that this is a societal obligation, why would you say that this obligation is exclusively only on those institutions which are non-minority institutions? In that sense, aren't you taking the two-nation theory forward by saying that certain groups are completely exempt from the application of laws? So on the one hand, you have a problem with the special treatment of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, but you don't see a problem with the exemption given to minority institutions on Right to Education Act. Now let's come to the political hypocrisy of it. You have been in power for the last 8 years, close to 9 years now. Why didn't you repeal that particular exemption? Who is to blame here? The Congress really has no power today to stop anything that you do. You have the power to bulldoze anyone and everyone. Why haven't you done it? How many Hindu schools and Hindu-run institutions and non-minority institutions were shut down as a consequence of the economic liabilities imposed by the Right to Education Act? There are multiple websites dedicated to this. In Delhi alone, several hundreds of schools were shut. And yet there is no movement on this front. This government still believes that it's a badge of honor for it to showcase the budgetary allocation for minority welfare schemes. Minority Welfare Ministry was set up only in 2006. It was not set up under Nehru. 2006 it was set up. You opposed it when you were in opposition. Did you deem it fit to dismantle this particular ministry in 2014 or at least in 2019? Is this in your list of priorities at least in 2023? No, it's not. It's very convenient to constantly bash previous dispensations. I would say rightly so, bash them for what they have done because we are facing the continuing effects of it. But जब सत्ता आपके हाथ में आ जाता है, आप उसका प्रयोग कैसे करते हैं? पहले टर्म में तो आपके पास you'll have enough excuses to say नहीं इन्होंने इतना गड्ढा खोदा है कि मुझे रोड भरना पड़ रहा है. You can say all of that. आप दूसरे टर्म में भी यही कहेंगे. You can't say that you have enough clout to get the goodwill of the Middle East and all other countries, but you don't have enough clout to make these fundamental changes in your own country. Next.
Yes, please. Yep. Can somebody?
Before the session is wound up, I think Sir needs to get a chance.
Yes.
So we'll come back to him. Yes, please. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll come back to you. Yeah.
I've got a question which may not be directly related to today's talk, but somehow it fits in. My question is, on what basis people like Prashant Bhushan and his cabal have access to emergent or emergency hearings in the Supreme Court? Why this cannot be challenged, and how can it stop?
The nature of the legal system is such that all are not equal. These are the realities. And it is not limited to any particular group or cabal. Okay, let's go a step further. How many people who've been involved in a hit and run case have managed to get the same treatment and expeditious hearing that a certain Bollywood actor got? Okay. Unfortunately, the nature of the system is such that it is not what your case is, but who is standing up for you. On the specific question with respect to the cabal that you mentioned, most institutions in this country have been left-leaning significantly, And even constitutional institutions are no exception to that default position. That default position has started getting a challenge only in the recent times. And I would also say, without naming any particular individual, that those who enjoyed a certain position of privilege and pride in the highest constitutional court of the country may not enjoy the same position today. That is also a reality, because the judiciary is also going through a serious phase of introspection and churn. Thanks to the presence of a lot of people who have been working for years to ensure that the balance is set right and everybody has a level playing field. The turning point, I think, was the Rafale case, where perhaps beyond the merits of the case, what was the intention behind raking up that particular issue was fairly clear to most people. And the manner in which that petition was dealt with by the Supreme Court, I think gave a fairly clear signal that people are not going to have that kind of sway anymore. I'm not saying that it has ended for good, but I would certainly say it is on its way out. It will take some more time before that level playing field is truly achieved. It will take at least 5 or 6 years. You must also remember one more thing. The human rights jurisprudence of this country and its ecosystem has been the exclusive preserve of the left for close to 40 years. Ask any law student, almost every judgment that deals with fundamental rights, privacy, free speech or whatnot has involved institutions such as PUCL, Common Cause, PUDR and whatnot. And most of these institutions or organizations are left-leaning. And that is because on the non-left side, we have not taken legal representation of some of these causes as seriously. In 2017, in perhaps my first major public engagement in IIT Madras, in my interaction with IIT Madras, I specifically pointed this out. ऐसा नहीं है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट जो है किसी की पैतृक संपत्ति है. How can you be shut out if you make a representation? You will not be. But the non-left side and specifically the Hindu community has not understood the value of legal representation seriously in these courts when it comes to some of these issues. Environment, human rights, gender justice, tribal rights, caste-related issues, these have not featured in your list of priorities when it comes to legal representation. It is now a relatively recent phenomenon, and I would say it's a much needed welcome change. It is happening.
Just a brief question again.
Yes, sir.
Are you planning on representing non-left side and challenging the Supreme Court? Or is there a movement?
I don't wish to challenge any institution. As someone who's been in the profession for 14 years, it's important to be a part of the system, to work with the system, to effect a change in the system. If you wish to be a vigilante activist, okay, let me put it this way. आप रोज अगर आ जाते हैं कि हमारे साथ ये हो गया, हम लुट गए, बर्बाद हो गए, you do that on a daily basis. You don't realize the fatigue that sets in the institution. आ गया ये मुंह उठा के, इसके पास और कोई काम नहीं है. That is more or less the fatigue that the other side is currently going through. हर दिन कोई बेकार का petition file कर देते हैं and they ask for an emergency hearing that gets dismissed outright. Okay? I've said this once, I'll make it abundantly clear. I am not, and I will never be an activist lawyer under any circumstances. It is a demotion to my skill sets and my professional capabilities, which I will never allow myself to go through. I'm a hardcore commercial litigator with very clear strengths as far as constitutional law is concerned. And as a practicing Hindu, I will take up select causes as part of my pro bono commitments, which I will represent to the best of my abilities. But I will never be the face of any Hindu movement either in court or outside of it. This I'm very clear about. And there's a good reason for this. If you want to be taken seriously by an institution, then you prove your competence on the basis of hardcore subjects, not on the basis of activism. And I will never subject myself to that kind of dilution of my professional capabilities. It is self-defeating, and please remember, the gentleman who you named is perhaps a second-generation lawyer. And therefore, these people have a legacy to protect them. I'm a first generation litigator who's climbed up the hard way as far as the professional ladder is concerned. So I will have to strike a balance between my professional obligations as a litigating commercial lawyer and my dharmic obligations as a practicing Hindu. I will always strike that balance. And I'll make this point in a better fashion. Earlier in the day at the bookstore, I said this. The model that I hope to represent or let's say set forth to people is, it is possible to strike a very decent balance between your pursuit of artha and your pursuit of dharma. And that is a workable model that I wish to present. If I have to choose a person for my legal team who I want to work with on certain important matters, even if he doesn't have dharmic commitment, but if he is professionally competent, I would bring him on board. Because case ke liye jo zaruri hai, that is what I will do. The reality of Hindu representation in the Supreme Court, at least for the better part of it, has been emotional petitions with very poor preparation, which goes to the Supreme Court and gets kicked out on day one. Professional competence and ideological commitment have to go hand in hand. Neither is a substitute for the other. That is the first principle, which is, if I want somebody to fire a bullet, I am not going to ask, "Aap Hindu ho ya kya ho? Will you fire the bullet for me or not?" is the first question. Do you think everybody who's working for the left is ideologically committed? No, they are not.
No, I think it's money matter too.
Absolutely. So providing a career path, grooming someone with fantastic skill sets, providing Rhodes scholarships and other scholarships to actually groom them from law school is the entire game. So if the Hindu society is so serious about it, where are your endowments for young lawyers? Where are your endowments to groom this talent? Where is your cultivation of professional lawyers to represent your causes? So this community has a lot of soul searching and introspection to do. Plus there are certain realities of the profession. As a practicing litigator who's extremely in love with the profession, I'm a lawyer and I'll die a lawyer, I'll not do anything else in my life. I will never ever subject myself to that kind of dilution. So I hope that sets the record straight. I hope nobody thinks of me as a Hindu activist lawyer. I am not one. I will never be one under any circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running out of time, but I think we'll take one last question.
Please take one from the lady, lest you and I are accused of misogyny. Yes.
So then the lady first.
Yes, please. She's been waiting for a while. So both of them, of course. Yeah.
Pranam, sir.
Pranam.
I have two questions for
Yes.
you. So I'm a law student in this college. Whenever we try to speak, we try to point out the barbarism in the so-called minority religion, we are advised to speak in hushed tones. Now, this comes through by my parents and my well-wishers, and they say, "We say this for you. We don't want you to meet the ends of Kamlesh Tiwari."
Or Nupur Sharma.
So that is my first question is, how do I tackle this? How do I become indifferent, or do I be careful? Or, I mean, not speaking is not an option for me. So how do I come about this? And the second question is, during this event, we were talking to Dr. Ananda Ranganathan, and the question of land acquisition came up. So the first thing that came to my mind was the third largest landowner of in India, that is the Waqf Board. Sir, there is what are the legal ways that we can stop that from happening, because that is happening on a terrifying scale? So that is my second question.
Put together a signature petition with 1 lakh signatures and write to the central government asking for the repealment of the Waqf Board.
We'll
Do
do that,
that.
sir. We'll do that.
What the legislature can do, हर बार हम कोर्ट पे जाके क्यों रोएं भाई? It is possible for the central government to come out with a model legislation on temple control and reduce the extent of state interference. It is possible for the central government to repeal the Places of Worship Act, where 40,000 occupied sites are still under the control of others. It is possible for the central government to repeal the Waqf Board Act, or at least tone down the extraordinary powers that's been given to it. It's possible for the central government to hit reset on Articles 25 to 30 and set the balance right. Everything that a legislature can do with a majority of 303 and more, hopefully in 2024, why should we always go to the judiciary for this? It makes sense for us to go to the judiciary when the Congress is in power. But why are we constantly going to the judiciary when the BJP is in power? Ask this uncomfortable question. It's so convenient to say, court ऐसा है वैसा है. भाई सरकार तो आपकी है, आप क्या कर रहे हैं? Why should a government be given a free pass? I'll see the mischievous part of this particular statement is someone on Twitter is going to say, is he saying that we should vote for the Congress? What's wrong with you? My position is very clear. You have a greater right of seeking account and answers from people who you voted for. So what's wrong with it? Now coming to the first question. You're a Hindu, I assume. Know the power of words. Put faith in the mind. In the last 6.5 to 7 years in my public engagements, I have said a lot of things. And I've still managed to say what I want to, staying within the bounds of legality and constitutionality. Have I held back my punches in any discussion? In any debate? Have I held back my material in the books when I speak of Mughal invasions and whatnot? I have not, right? I have placed reliance on two aspects, tathya and tark, facts and logic. Do not allow your sense of angst or anxiety to overpower your sense of judgment and clarity. Even in the worst of situations when provoked, your training both as an individual and as a lawyer must kick in. That I will fire bullets, but my tongue will always be under my control. And I will never ever lose my balance. And if I get aggressive, it must be control ferocity. Which means the other side must run for cover without knowing how to respond to it. That is not going to happen unless and until you have both research and the power of argumentation and articulation in your complete control. So since you're a law student, work on sharpening the mind. It will automatically lend sharpness to your tongue. Focus on ensuring that you're never ever losing your sandarsh, your sense of objectivity. And equally be aware of the flaws in your own position. Don't buy into your BS so much that you're not able to see through the flaws in your position. Be open to the let's say the flaws in your position. It's very important. In which case, the red team and the blue team must constantly be inside your own head. One batting for you, one batting against you. Only then you're preparing for, in anticipation for the opposition that's going to come your way. That lady had a question. Please, go ahead. Piche. I'll end it with you, don't worry. Yeah.
Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
So my question to you is, you were very vocal about Sabarimala issue.
Yes.
You actually explained the real reason behind the rituals followed there.
Yes.
I was following you in every debate and all. My question to you is, as the case is going on in Supreme Court, will the verdict will be in favor of Hindus, or they will change it completely and make it a tourist spot? Having said that, I have one more question to you. What a Hindu voter should do? Continue to vote for BJP in the hope of development of country and that of Hindus, or we have any other option?
So to answer your first question, for a long time I've been asking the Bar Council to introduce astrology as part of legal education. I don't know. I have no idea. कोर्ट क्या कहेगी? I have no idea. उस दिन शनि किस तरफ बैठेगा मुझे नहीं पता है. Okay? And by the way, Shani is the Lord of Justice. It's not a bad planet at all. It is actually the planet for Dharma, which means for everything that you have done, scores will be settled. And by the time he leaves, by the time Sadesati is complete, he will do good and go. That is the nature of Shani. Hopefully, if you have learnt your lessons. So my point is, I don't know which way the system will go. I'm more interested in a slightly different question. At least now, is there greater consensus in the Hindu community on the need to preserve the practice of the Sabarimala temple? Or do we still have woke idiots from within the community who don't understand what the institution stands for? If yes, आप आज केस जीत सकते हैं. कल अगर woke सरकार आई तो a judgment can be reversed by a legislative act. What do you do then? It's a very real possibility. And that is the left's investment in your children in a long-term battle, in an infinite war. So you might succeed in, let's say, current day terms because you believe that हमारी सरकार है, पता नहीं किसकी सरकार है, but still. But future का क्या होगा, we don't know. So I would want to invest in quality representation before the court as well as in changing and shaping minds in the society. Focus on both. Now recently the Dawoodi Bohra case has been referred to the same Sabarimala 9-judge bench on whether the head of the community has the power to excommunicate people from the community. So all these questions. Female genital mutilation, entry of Parsi women into the Agyaris, then Sabarimala have all been clubbed together. Now I'll tell you what the textbook Hindu mind of today will say. Female genital mutilation galat hai. Entry of Parsi women into Agyaris must be allowed. Now therefore I'm left with no other option but to say that women must also be allowed inside Sabarimala. Or women of the reproductive age group. Okay? This would be the statement. It is Hindus who come and tell me, if women can be allowed inside the Haji Ali mosque, how can you take a different position with respect to Sabarimala? अरे भाई मस्जिद और मंदिर एक है क्या? दोनों में आपको अंतर समझ में नहीं आता है? You go there to pray, here you go to worship. There's a difference between prayer and worship. प्राण प्रतिष्ठा यहाँ पे होती है, वहाँ पे प्राण प्रतिष्ठा नहीं होती है. मूल मंत्र यहाँ पे पढ़ा जाता है, वहाँ पे मूल मंत्र नहीं पढ़ा जाता है. क्या बात कर रहे हैं? गर्भगृह का कॉन्सेप्ट यहाँ पे है, वहाँ पे है क्या? गर्भगृह क्यों है? क्योंकि वहाँ पे एक मूर्ति का प्रतिष्ठान हुआ है. मूर्ति का प्रतिष्ठान, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसके पीछे का तात्पर्य क्या है? That means an energy space has been consecrated. That energy space has a particular, let's say, vidhi through which that sanctity is maintained. आपको equality ज़्यादा चाहिए या spiritual quality चाहिए आपको? What is your priority? So that's one. Second, I repeat in the land of Modi. I am not saying go against the BJP. Please. There is a massive troll army sitting on Twitter. पीछे पड़ जाएंगे. लेकिन इतना जरूर कहूंगा, अगर हिंदू हित के खिलाफ या विरुद्ध कुछ होता है, तब मैं जरूर बोलूंगा, चाहे कितनी भी आर्मी हो. And it doesn't make a difference who is in power. Because the logic of Hindu hit will not change. That will remain the same. Coming to the actual reality, do we have other options as on date? No. अगर कांग्रेस में थोड़ा भी रत्ती भर का भी दिमाग होता, which is not possible considering who is the president now, is you would go in the direction of competitive Hindutva. What would you do? आप एक प्रॉपर हिसाब किताब बनाएंगे. आपने हिंदुओं के लिए कहा कि हम ये करेंगे, ये करेंगे. आपने क्या किया है? The Congress should ask this question. Instead, they are stuck in the same mold as the Ahmed Patel-Sonia Gandhi combination. Both of them representing whatever they represent. I leave it to your imagination. So, they have effectively gone down the path of implosion. They are running towards suicide. Okay. And which is why I think I would agree with what Anand said on a television debate, that the BJP is blessed with a joke of an opposition. Matlab, the thing is, in Ramayana they say, जब भी वाली रण के लिए जाते थे, enemy का जो strength था वो 50% कम हो जाता था. Okay, that was the vardhan that was given to Wali. I think that is the exact blessing that is being given to BJP. that you will be blessed with the joke of an opposition. And that is exactly what is happening. Now, as I said, this goes back to the first point, which means जब सरकार कुछ नहीं करती है हिंदू हित में, पूछने वाला भी कोई नहीं रहा. Now you see how it goes back to the first question, the quality of public discourse. You are entirely dependent, your destinies, your interests, your Hindu hit, everything is tied to one political option, which was not the case in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because cultural organizations were equally investing in the Congress and the BJP at that time, or the Jan Sangh at that time. That is what makes sense, because that is the strategy of other communities. कोई भी आए वो पहले क्या करते हैं, हम minority के लिए इतना पैसा देते हैं. Everybody is forced to say this. Why isn't every government under the same compulsion to say हमने हिंदुओं के लिए इतना किया है? Okay, logically speaking, and just apply common sense, can you guarantee that a particular party will stay in power forever? Which is why it makes much more sense to invest in the policy so that it can outlast the existence of a particular government. Because एक बार policy बन गया, उसको roll back करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. Which is one of the reasons that the BJP government is also struggling to roll back what the Congress did by way of minority welfare schemes. That's their excuse, of course. I'm saying there is some sense to that excuse, although I don't agree with it fully. Article 370 को आपने तो पूरी तरह से roll back कर दिया. At least you've made it an apunsak at this point, right? Why can't you do the same thing with others? So what is the strategy or what is the option left for the Hindu voter? Vote करो, क्या करें? लेकिन सवाल भी पूछो, clear सवाल पूछो. Don't become a Kavali Mandali. Keep clapping for everything. Then you might as well have a Jamura. Please don't do it. As the Hindu community, which doesn't subscribe to a herd mentality, you have greater obligation because you're a global minority which is facing serious civilizational existential challenges. Focus on that. So whenever you speak of development, remember, you are focusing on development, the other side is focusing on religious expansion. So your priorities are very different. You are going to vote for Vande Bharat. You are going to vote for infrastructure. They are going to vote for minority allocation. So you need to be able to have a bargaining chip which focuses as much on development but equally on Sanskriti, Dharmo, Hindu civilization. Because are you comfortable living in an uber developed country with Hindu population being reduced to 50%? That is the question that you should answer. If that is not the case, आप करने के लिए क्या तैयार हैं? Simple question. There is a silent demographic war that's going on through illegal migration. What has the government done on it? Ask these questions. Thank you. Delimitation का जो game अभी खेला जा रहा है, what you're basically doing is, मैं constituency को कट पीट के I'll constantly change the balance. आप कितने दिन ये गेम खेलेंगे भाई? एक दिन तो तादाद बढ़नी ही है, तब delimitation का गेम कैसे खेलेंगे आप? You're trying to protect Assam through delimitation. How long will it survive? राम भरोसे.